You can't make sentences if you don't understand sentence structure in Arabic. Arabic is primarily a VSO language. A VSO language is one that has a basic verb, subject, object, word order. In English we say, Adam ate an apple. We have the subject first, then the verb, followed by the object. However, in Arabic, the word order would be as the following. أكل آدم تفاحة. Verb first, subject second, object last. It would sound like this in English. Ate Adam an apple. Arabic is quite flexible when it comes to word order, so it is also grammatically correct to say آدم أكل تفاحة. Now, it's true that Arabic is a VSO language, but the verb is not always there in the sentence. That's why we have two types of sentences, nominal, ismiyah, and verbal, fi'liyah. Let's start with nominal sentences. Nominal sentences are sentences that start with a noun or a pronoun. They consist of two parts, the subject, al-mubtada, and the predicate, al-khabar. The subject is the noun you want to inform about, and the predicate is the part of the sentence that tells something about the subject. It is important for our predicate not to start with alif lam, because if it does, it will no longer be a predicate, but an adjective. Let's observe some examples together to identify grammatical patterns of subjects and predicates in Arabic. Take a look at this sentence. الامتحان صعب. The exam is hard. Notice how the subject is definite because it starts with alif lam and ends with dhamma, and how the predicate ends with dhammatain. As we analyze more sentences, notice how these patterns stay consistent. المعلم صارم. The teacher is strict. Again, our subject, المعلم, starts with alif lam and ends with dhamma, while our predicate, صارم, ends with dhammatain. Now, let's look at this one last example. المعلمة صارمة. The teacher is strict. Try to identify the subject and the predicate. Observe the endings closely. Yes, the subject is المعلمة and the predicate is صارمة. The last two examples mean almost the same thing, but can you spot the difference between them? Yes, we added تاء مربوطة to both the subject and the predicate in the last example. If you are not familiar with تاء مربوطة, then it's essentially what we add to many nouns and adjectives to make them feminine. So in this example, المعلمة is a female teacher. But why did we add تاء مربوطة to the predicate as well? It's because of what we call subject-predicate agreement. This agreement is in terms of gender and number. The subject and the predicate always agree in gender. If the subject is masculine, the predicate is masculine. If the subject is feminine, the predicate is feminine. As for number, if the subject is singular, the predicate must be singular. If the subject is plural, the predicate can be singular or plural depending on the subject itself. Look at the following examples. We have المعلم صارم. The teacher is strict. المعلم is the subject, المبتدأ, and صارم is the predicate, الخبر. المعلم is masculine and singular, so the predicate صارم is masculine and singular too. المعلمة صارمة. المعلمة is feminine and singular, so the predicate صارمة is also feminine and singular. المعلمون صارمون. Here, our subject is plural. So, according to the subject-predicate agreement, the predicate can be also singular or plural depending on the subject. Our subject here in this example is المعلمون. Teachers are a specific group of people. When the subject refers to a specific group of people, the predicate agrees with it in both gender and number. Therefore, the predicate in this example is masculine and plural. Another example is المعلمات صارمات. المعلمات are female teachers. So, again, the subject is a specific group of people. Therefore, The predicate صارمات is also feminine and plural. Next, البيوت كبيرة. The houses are big. Did you notice? The subject in this example does not refer to a specific group of people. It is a non-living thing in its plural form, which makes it feminine, since in Arabic, plural non-living things or objects are always feminine, even if they are masculine in their singular form, which is also the case of buyut. Now, look at the predicate. It is feminine and singular despite the subject being plural. This is one of the three cases in which the predicate is singular even when the subject is plural. Since the subject is a non-living thing, the predicate does not agree with it in number and remains singular. Let's explore the second case where the predicate also remains singular. النمور سريعة. Tigers are fast. النمور is in its plural form, which makes it feminine. The same rule we have just discussed applies. Why? Because tigers are animals. Therefore, the predicate سريعة is feminine and it remains singular despite النمور being plural. The third and the last case, الأشجار جميلة. Trees are beautiful. Trees are plants. Remember, this is the third case, so the same rule applies. Plants are always feminine in their plural form and the predicate remains singular. It does not agree with its subject in number, but it does agree in gender, so it is also feminine. Alright, in previous examples, we've seen the predicate as a single word, but it can also be a nominal sentence, like الزرافة رقبتها طويلة. The giraffe has a long neck. الزرافة is our subject and رقبتها طويلة is our predicate, since it is telling us that the giraffe has a long neck. The predicate is a nominal sentence because it starts with the noun رقبتها. The predicate can also be a verbal sentence, like in this example, المعلم يشرح الدرس. The teacher is explaining the lesson. المعلم is the subject and يشرح الدرس is a verbal sentence since it starts with the verb يشرح and is the predicate because it tells us what the teacher is doing. Lastly, the predicate can be a phrase. الطالب في المدرسة. The student is at school. الطالب is the subject and في المدرسة is the predicate as it tells us where the student is. It is a phrase because it does not start with a noun or a verb, but rather with a preposition, حرف. Verbal sentences start with verbs. They consist of 2 or 3 parts, a verb, فعل, and a subject, فاعل, a verb, فعل, a subject, فاعل, and an object, مفعول به. Let's observe the following sentences. قرأ الولد. The boy read. نام الولد. The boy slept. قرأ is the verb and الولد is the subject, فاعل. The boy read and the boy slept. Is there something missing in the first sentence? Yes, the object is missing. Why? Because when you read the first sentence, you automatically ask the question, what? Or ماذا? What did the boy read? ماذا قرأ الولد? The answer, for example, can be, the boy read the book. قرأ الولد الكتاب. The sentence is now grammatically correct because it has a complete meaning. So again, we can have verbal sentences with just the verb and the subject, and we can also have verbal sentences with the verb, subject, and object. It all depends on the verb. Now, remember the subject-predicate agreement that we have in nominal sentences? We do have a similar agreement in verbal sentences. Subject-verb agreement. We have 2 cases, when the verb comes before the subject and when the verb comes after the subject. If the verb comes before the subject, it agrees with the subject in gender, but it stays singular even if the subject is plural. If the verb comes after the subject, it agrees with the subject in gender and number. Let us see a couple of examples of both cases. جاء الطلاب. The students came. جاء is the verb and الطلاب is the subject. Notice how the verb is singular even though the subject is plural. That's because the verb came before the subject, so it only agrees with the subject in gender. The subject is masculine, so the verb is masculine as well. Another example of the first case is جاءت الطالبات. The female students came. Again, the verb came before the subject, so it stays singular despite the subject الطالبات being plural. الطالبات is feminine, so the verb جاءت is feminine. Now, let's see how the verb agrees with the subject in number and not only in gender when it comes after the subject. الطلاب جاءوا. The students came. Observe the sentence. The subject is the same as the one in the first example of the first case, but the verb is conjugated differently. The verb came after the subject, so it must agree with the subject in gender and number, which makes it masculine and plural. The last example we have is الطالبات جئنا. The female students came. It's the same thing. The verb came after the subject, so it agrees with the subject in gender and number. الطالبات is feminine and plural, so جئنا is feminine and plural.